Good afternoon, class. This is Corinne Lindsay, and it is my pleasure to present this week's multimedia presentation. I'll be presenting an overview of Thomas Aquinas' natural law theory, Immanuel Kant's categorical imperatives, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism theory, and Thomas Hobbes' contractarianism theory. Contractarianism is the only theory I have not heard prior to this class, and I find it pretty interesting. I'm supposed to be brief, so this is just a quick overview, and I'll move on to compare utilitarianism and contractarianism to public admin. And finally, I'll talk about Aristotle's virtue theory and how it applies to public administration. So this is going to be the longest slide because I have to go over all of these theories here. I'll start in order with Thomas Aquinas and his theory of natural law. Aquinas was considered a saint, therefore his theory is pretty religious based. However, he doesn't really attribute much to the Bible. God gave us his expectations and the tools to meet those expectations. So Aquinas states that we're basically preloaded with the tools that we can use to be good people. He talks about some basic human instincts or things that we seek out naturally, such as life preservation, not just in our own lives, but basically our entire species, so to speak of through reproduction. We naturally seek God. We seek to avoid offending others, and we try to avoid ignorance through learning and education. Aquinas talks about these natural instincts as being preloaded within us, therefore we don't need the Bible as a source book for moral guidance. I found that interesting coming from someone with such a religious background. Moving on for time's sake to Immanuel Kant and his categorical imperatives theory. Kant believed religion and morality should not be paired because morality is constant and religious isn't. I can understand this statement because the Bible flip-flops back and forth, but especially if you're not familiar with it, it takes a look as if it looks as if it's not constant, even though if you're pretty religious with the Christian faith and you know the Bible pretty well, you can see that there is a consistency about it. But moving on, this is probably why Aquinas stayed away from the Bible and his natural law theory, if you think about it. Kant tells us we don't need religion to tell us what's right from wrong, that we should be able to decipher from this by our own wits. He states categorical imperatives are commands that must be followed regardless of our personal desires, and our moral commands can come from reason, or our wits, as I said before. He also had a formula for humanity, which basically states to treat others kindly and not simply use us for our own gains, or use people for our own gains. He made a point when he tells us humans are not simply objects to be used, like inanimate objects such as books or tools. He talks about not manipulating morals for our own benefit, which means basically that everyone is to do, if it's not okay for everyone to do, then it's not okay for you to do. We see that a lot in parenting, where don't do as I do, just do as I say type of thing. He's against that. Moving on to utilitarianism, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill's theory. It's about the results of our actions, not so much about the intent of the action. This moral theory should apply to everyone, such as Kant described in his moral theory, so there's a link between those two. The thing about utilitarianism is it's about the masses, what is best for the most amount of people. I'm going to talk about this on my next slide because I found a pretty great illustration of that. In this theory, we expected to sacrifice personally for the sake of many. That's also on the illustration on the next slide. That's utilitarianism in a nutshell, though. So Thomas Hobbes' theory of contractarianism is the one that I found intriguing. It talks about these moral contracts we engage in, whether we're aware of them explicitly or not, and they're implied. Hobbes believed that these contracts binding, and the world would be in utter chaos without these. The contracts are sort of a give and take. If you take from society, you must give back to society. If you enjoy your liberties, then you must pay with taxes. You'll go further on this on the next slide, but there's a summary of each theory from this week. So here we are with comparing utilitarianism and contractarianism to public administration. They're both in essence results-based and for the masses. In public administration, there's a direct link to politics. Politics drives lobbyists who pass the laws that the public administrators make sure are followed. Politics are people-driven. The voting is done by the people or the masses. So these masses of people are all engaged in these contracts with the laws that they voted for to pass, and as well as the people they voted for into office, and so on. So the contracts in public administration are those where we sign, let's just say, for example, a document like when you go to get your driver's license. So you sign this document at the DMV that basically says that we will not drink and drive, and if we're caught, we're no longer have the privilege to drive. So there's an example of a contract, at least an explicit one. Both utilitarianism and contractarianism can change as the needs of the masses change. This is why we have amendments to our Constitution. So our Constitution is basically a contract for the whole society of America. So about this illustration to the lower left here of the slide, it depicts utilitarianism in that which way should the morality of the person with the lever choose to send that train. I would say if the person with the lever uses a utilitarianistic moral approach, then the single guy is in for it. Here we are with applying the virtue theory to public administration. As you can see here, I have an illustration of Aristotle on the right, and to the lower left is a depiction of St. Thomas Aquinas, who used a lot of Aristotle's philosophical ideas in his own moral theories. I don't know why, but it was difficult to get a picture of Aquinas looking up to the left. Almost all the pictures I could find had him looking to the right, but eventually I found one, so here it is. Anyhow, virtue theory runs along the same lines as public administration in that it is character-based. Public administrators must have good character. It talks about that it must be functioning. So public administrators are focused on the proper functioning of their organization. Virtue theory is about doing the right thing. We would hope that all of our public administrators are doing the right thing, rather than the easy way anyways. Virtue theory talks about the delivering of bad news, being able to deliver this bad news to people. And public administrators have to tell people things they don't necessarily want to hear. Quite a bit, actually. Negative things that are either about their work product or their behavior. And proper delivery is key to getting them to recognize the issue, understand it, and figure out how to get past it. So virtuous behavior also takes experience. And so does public administration. We're not born to know how to do these things. Public administration takes a lot of time and experience to know what is the proper way of handling certain situations. If certain situations are handled wrong, they can be costly to the organization and to everyone who works there. Here we are on the final slide. That's all I have for you this week. These are my references and sources for the content, as well as some of the photos. I'll talk to you all at my next presentation. Farewell.